I'm pleased to be joined now by Congressman Darrell, Issa, Republican from Vista. Congressman, good to have you back on KOGO.
Well, thanks for having me back, Chris, and I can't resist reminding everyone that it's healthcare cost expansion and government interference. The word reform is just how we say that in Washington.
Oh, I tried to say reform with a sarcastic twist, and hopefully enough listeners have been hearing me rant about it for a while that they understand this.
And talk radio really made a huge difference in informing people. You know, I think the average person hears reform and they go, whoa, that must be good. And then somebody says, okay, we're going from 18% of GDP to 22% of GDP, and we're still not covering 12 million Americans, even after we do all these tax increases and cuts in senior citizens' earned benefits. And you go, well, maybe it's not so good. But without the message that you on KOGO and others are putting out, you know, this education process would be strictly whatever the party in power is saying. And right now the party in power thinks that we're not listening, but they haven't quite figured out, in the case of health care or in the case of AIG, they haven't figured out you are listening. The difference is you just disagree.
Before we get to AIG, a little bit more on health care. Reading between the lines, it seems to me that among the most relieved folks that health care reform died are the 40 or 50 of your House Democratic colleagues who could lose because of health care non-reform. I know you guys can't divulge confidences of what's said off the record, but was there relief not just among Republicans, but among some Democrats that this monstrosity has apparently died?
Oh, absolutely. Blue Dog Democrats, and particularly, if you remember, the pro-life Democrats who were offered the opportunity to keep it alive for voting for something that their conscience said they couldn't vote for, they were thrilled when after they told Pelosi, no, I will not vote for the Senate bill, even though I voted for the House bill, because it goes against my conscience. And those members particularly were really being brutalized over something that, whether you're on one side or another, the issue, it's a vote of conscience. And so those people particularly, like Bart Stupak and others, they felt really much better that we're going to get to do this over again, hopefully in small pieces. You know, it would take one small 11-page bill to give every American the ability to simply sign up for the same health care that members of Congress get. And yet we had thousands of pages to do everything but that.
Now, this issue is extraordinarily complicated, so I hope that listeners can bear with us as we try to go through it, involving American International Group, the massive insurer whose government bailout in the last year of the Bush administration and subsequent actions involving the Obama administration is really key to the huge expansion of government involvement in the American economy. Now, Congressman, you've been doing a wonderful job as the ranking minority member on the House Government and Oversight Committee, trying to get some crucial details about what really went on during the months when the AIG bailout was going on. And in particular, you've drawn attention to shenanigans involving Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner. If you could give the short version that listeners can get a hold of to explain what's the scandal here and what's the information that you're struggling to get from the Treasury Department.
Well, the short story is this. After the American people, through members of the House and Senate, got this $700 billion slush fund, Tim Geithner's people at the New York Fed and Treasury Secretary, Secretary Paulson and Bernanke, Fed Chairman Bernanke, orchestrated paying 100%, I repeat, 100% of all the insurance claims that AIG potentially owed, even though AIG was bankrupt. So instead of going in and saying these guarantees are floating on the market at 25 cents on the dollar, we'll buy them up for 50 cents on the dollar, or we'll loan you the money, they paid out $62 billion. More than half of it left the United States for foreign banks. And that wouldn't be the scandal. That would just be the business as usual in Washington. But then they ordered it covered up. They worked with the Securities Exchange Commission to not disclose who was getting the money and the fact that they were paying 100 cents on the dollar. And we have an email train that just goes every direction. It looks like Grand Central Station with tracks leading off to Bernanke, to people close to Geithner. Now, Secretary Geithner is saying, I was recused. I didn't know about it. Meantime, during that entire time, he's running back and forth to Capitol Hill, basically saying, I'm running things, and I'm doing such a good job. Please consider me for President Obama's cabinet. That's it. It's that simple. It isn't the $62 billion a year dollars that got him in trouble, as unseemly as that is. It's the fact that they covered it up.
That's outrageous. This is Top Story on AM 600 KOGO, San Diego's news and talk station. I'm Chris Reed of the Union Tribune editorial page, talking with Congressman Darrell, Issa, a Republican from Vista. Now, in the wake of last week's shocking developments in Massachusetts, Democrats have a new playbook, and its main page seems to be playing the populist card against Wall Street, so you're seeing opposition to Bernanke's reappointment and things like that. Does this bode well for your efforts to use the House Government and Oversight Committee to go after shenanigans related to TARP? Because in the past, it seems like you really haven't gotten as much support as one might expect, given how juicy it is, what you've already uncovered. What do you think your Democrat colleagues on the Government Oversight Committee are going to do when you bring all this up in hearings, I guess, on Wednesday?
Well, Chris, I think they're going to pile on. I think they're going to suddenly be born again, caring about the taxpayer. The strange thing is they're going to limit it to bashing banks and bashing people who have large salaries and bonuses. The strange thing is, and this is something that Warren Buffett said last Wednesday on CNBC for about an hour. What he said was, well, what about, General Motors and Chrysler? Are we going to have a tax on them because we bailed them out and we're not going to get paid back? What about the insurance industry? AIG was an insurance company. It wasn't a bank. And I think the Oracle of Omaha, even though he voted for Obama, has figured out, wait a second here. It's not about bashing people who pay back their debts, earn a lot of money, and they're private companies. We may not like the bonuses they're getting, but that's up to the stockholders, who are the ones that don't get the dividends. When are we going to stop vilifying people and start praising people who create jobs and employment? Because right now, the stimulus, which is the other hot topic, the stimulus is simply hiring government workers so they don't lose their jobs. And they're calling it jobs saved, but it's not private sector jobs saved. It's public sector jobs saved. And although I appreciate our teachers and our firefighters and so on, if we don't start making things that we export and producing products and services in the private sector, we're not getting out of this recession.
Now, the headline the last 2 hours out of Washington, D.C. is that the Obama administration is talking about a 3-year freeze on some domestic discretionary spending, but they're suggesting it wouldn't necessarily start until after this fiscal year ends, so in other words, after the November elections. And at the same time, they are supporting the effort to raise the national debt level, something like $1.9 trillion, from $12.4 trillion to $14.3 trillion, so this issue won't come up later in the election year. Now, this just seems so rankly obvious that these two ideas are incompatible and that it's all a PR game, this alleged domestic spending freeze. What have you heard about it so far, and do you share my cynicism about its likely intent?
Well, Chris, I'll see your cynicism and raise you one, which is that, Governor Schwarzenegger was back last week talking about if he could just get his fair share from Washington, California wouldn't have problems. The real bottom line problem is that government, local in San Diego, certainly statewide in California, and in the federal government, they've grown faster than anything in the private sector, and they continue to talk about tight budgets. But it's like saying that, water's evaporating. Okay, if water's evaporating, there'll be less of it. But, in fact, we have more of it. And, the challenge we have is California and Washington need to make cuts now. They need to make the hard cuts now instead of saying, here's how we balance the budget. We take more money now and we have cuts down the road. Our taxes go up, the cuts never come. If you want to make cuts, you start cutting tomorrow. The good news is congressmen are so ashamed they won't raise their own pay this year. But short of that, I don't see anyone willing to make any cuts. President Obama was trying to work around the fact that an independent commission determined that seniors did not have a cost of living increase the way it was calculated. And even that, he said, we can't have that. Well, wait a second. I feel for our seniors, but When the commission says that it goes up by this amount, we pay it. When the commission says it doesn't go up, we're going to still pay it. That's the kind of thinking in Washington. Dollars get you votes. Washington has to get off of buying votes. The way they did it in the Senate to almost get that bill passed, and the way they do it every day to do earmarks and come home and talk about the new clinic or some new road as though somehow that was good when, in fact, it's all just spending your money. And, I voted for Governor Schwarzenegger. I'm not apologetic, but he could do better. I didn't vote for President Obama, but I won't hold him responsible. I'll hold the system here that stands under Republicans and Democrats in a way that intoxicated sailors would be offended if we compared them to the way Washington works.
Congressman, you only have about 45 seconds or so. At this point, what do you think the odds are that come January 2011, you will be chairman of the House Government Oversight Committee, not just ranking minority member?
It's far better than 50-50 because there seems to be no sign from the Obama administration or from Speaker Nancy Pelosi of any kind of a change that would cause the American people not to say, like they said in Massachusetts, it's not that we're necessarily hiring every Republican that's going to win in November. It's that we've got to fire the Democrats if we're going to get any kind of balance on our tax dollars.
Well, I sure hope you're right. Thank you very much for coming on. I always appreciate it. That's Congressman Darrell Issa, a Republican from Vista. Thanks, Darrell. Thanks, Congressman.